Good evening and welcome to today's episode of Wanderlust Wednesdays. I'm going to be talking about food. We have a culinary journey along the Rhine. And the Rhine, of course, is one of the rivers that we travel on quite a lot. With our river cruises, there is, off the top of my head, there's about 6 cruises that travel at least part of the Rhine. And what I will do is I will just take you through the main ports that we visit between Amsterdam and Basel, and we'll talk a little bit about food. And I'll also give you an idea of what it's like to eat on the ship. And then it's not just that one Rhine getaway cruise, but it's a lot of different cruises that you could experience, where you can experience at least a part of what there is to drink and to eat along the Rhine. So the Rhine River voyages that we're talking about specifically are the Rhine Getaway, the Grand European Tour, the Paris to the Swiss Alps, Holland and Belgium, the Tulips and Windmills, which do just a tiny little bit of the Rhine, just really the delta, if you will, the Cities of Lights, and the European Sojourn, which is a very long cruise that goes all the way through Europe. And we'll show you a map in the next slide that gives you at least the Rhine Getaway. This is kind of the area that we will focus on when it comes to the particular food and drink. But again, it's more in general about what the experience is like, how we want you to experience a destination, because it's more than just sightseeing. It is eating, drinking, hearing, touching. We really want you to use all your senses when you travel with us. And as we always do, we start with a brief introductory video.
Our Rhine Getaway itinerary presents all the highlights of the legendary Rhine in just 8 days. Your journey begins in timeless Amsterdam. Soak in rich colours amid the stained glass of Cologne's Gothic cathedral. Explore the mighty Ehrenbreitstein fortress that overlooks Koblenz and enjoy an evening stroll along the cobblestones of Rüdesheim. With dawn comes Speyer, a quaint German town on the Rhine's west bank, where you can marvel at the architectural splendour of the city's Romanesque cathedral. Strasbourg, France follows with its timeless old town, while Germany's Black Forest region is rich in history and culture. Your voyage concludes in the pretty city of Basel, Switzerland.
All right, so let's get started with a culinary cruise along the Rhine. And we start in Amsterdam. And on the left-hand side, you see my favorite cafe in all of Amsterdam. That's at Papeneiland. And then on the right-hand side, those are herring. This is not exactly, we wanted to show you the actual fish, but this is not how the Dutch eat their herring. What you do early on in the year in particular, you eat what's sometimes called the new herring. And traditionally, what that meant was that throughout the winter, people would eat herring that was salted. And then in spring, as the ships went out again and the relatively young herring was being caught, then you didn't have to eat the old stuff anymore. And the old stuff was getting very, very salty because that's how fish was preserved. So everyone was super happy when new herring came around. And the way that you eat this is you slice open the fish, you get rid of everything, and you don't have to do this, by the way. The people that sell you the herring will do this for you. You slice open the fish, you get everything out. You do cut off the head, and the one thing that you leave in there is the fish's pancreas, because that will that will start the fermentation process. So the fish that you eat is slightly fermented. You eat it with onions. It is an acquired taste. But I can highly recommend it, and you have to eat it the right way. That's very important. I will show you how you do this. So you have the fish. Imagine you have a little paper tray, because that's how they come. And then you take the fish by the tail, and then you lift it, and you do this. And you eat it. I mean, you don't have to eat the whole thing at once. That's a little gluttonous, but you do eat it as you kind of lower it down into your mouth. Do it once. It's an acquired taste, but you should do it once because it's great fun, and it's something very, very Dutch. And it's something that has to do, the majority of you will travel on the tulips and windmills in spring, and that's also the season of the new herring. And so it's perfect because you will find little stalls all over Holland that sell the new herring. That's one. The other thing, of course, in Holland that you should try is cheese. And I said this actually last week. We ended up talking, Irene and I, a colleague of mine who's also Dutch, we talked a little bit about food, and we ended up talking about cheese. Now, what we do on many of the Rhine cruises is just a little upriver from Amsterdam as we make our way towards Basel in Switzerland. We pass by the windmills of Kinderdijk, and that is an area that is below sea level. It's all grass because very little else will grow there. It's a little soggy. So cows love it. Very nice green lush grass, and cows produce milk, and milk we turn into cheese. So right where the windmills are, you have all these little, and some are somewhat bigger, you have these cheese farms. Just north of the windmills, by the way, is the Dutch city of Gouda. And Gouda, from medieval times on, was a trade center for cheese. It was where you went to get the cheese weighed, and where you got a little mark that told you, okay, this is exactly how much this cheese weighs. So it was a distribution center, much more than a center of a place where cheese was actually produced. This is why most of the cheese that you would get today in Holland is still called Gouda. It has nothing to do with a particular procedure of making cheese, because most cheese in Holland is made in a very, very similar fashion. They're always cooked. They're always semi-hard cheeses, and they age, and they end up in these salt baths. You can see that in this image, where they spend quite a bit of time in this brine to give it extra flavor. And as the cheese ages, it gains in flavor, and that's essentially how the Dutch eat their cheese. So you would go to the market, you would buy a piece of young cheese, and then something, and there's a whole list of gradations in how old your cheese is. It's not just young or old. There's like 4 or 5 different levels of what aged cheese is. If you really like it salty and with a lot of flavor, you eat the really old cheese that crumbles. And if you just like it very creamy, you start with young cheese. One way or another, we take you to a farm that makes authentic cheese the way that they produce what any Dutch person would eat. If you go to Amsterdam, you have great cheese stores there where you can buy all manners of cheese. If you forget about your cheese at the end of your trip, let's say you book Basel to Amsterdam, and the only place where you can get cheese is Schiphol, you're a little late, because now what you're going to get is cheese that is really just made for the tourism trade. And it comes in small balls, and no Dutch person would ever buy that, because the Dutch are very frugal. And what you buy with a small ball of cheese is a lot of rind and relatively little cheese. And the rind of a Dutch cheese you cannot eat. It's hard, it's usually coated in paraffin, so it's waste. Essentially, a small little round ball of cheese is an awful lot of waste. Again, no Dutch person would ever buy that. So then that's about the cheese. You can do this. We visit a cheese farm. You can observe the whole process, and of course, buy your cheese there. Next, and this is also, the slide says Amsterdam, but this is actually related more to Gouda than it is to Amsterdam. These waffles that you can get everywhere now, including Trader Joe's, by the way, if you happen to have a Trader Joe's where you live. But the city where these originated is Gouda. They're very simple. They're these crumbly wafers that are kept together with a little bit of caramel, with a very thin layer of caramel, and then they're packaged in packages of 10. What you do when you eat them, because you don't eat them necessarily. You can get them fresh, but most people just buy them in the supermarket or in a bakery. And before you eat them, you put them on your coffee so that they get a little soft. You leave them on there too long, and they'll land in your coffee. That's not good. But it's really good if you leave it there for just a little bit, because the steam from the coffee warms up your wafer a little bit, and it makes it a little softer. That's how you're supposed to eat them. And originally they came from Gouda. I went to high school in Gouda on my bicycle, and there were three big industries. There was the cheese warehousing, there was candle making, and there were the stroopwafels. And you could always tell where the wind was coming from. If it was blowing from the right direction, you would go to school and you'd be in these wafts of caramel wafers. And if it came from the wrong direction, it came from the candle making factories, and those smell something awful. So you could always tell. It's like, oh gosh, the wind is coming from the west today. Not a good ride to school. Wind coming from the east, very nice ride to school. So much about the Dutch food. We're moving on. We're moving upriver, and then we reach Cologne. And Cologne is one of the largest cities in Germany. It's also one of the oldest cities, and it has a lot of traditions that are very much at home just in Cologne. It's a city that has historically had a bishopric, so religion is still very strong. Lots of churches in Cologne. People are Catholic, while the surrounding area is all Protestant, but the city itself is quite Catholic. And it was always a very industrial place. So a lot of the food that people in Cologne really like is actually, if you will, poor people's food. It's simple, it's basic. Quite often it's a little stick to your ribs. And this is a perfect example. What you see here, a kartoffelpuffer, is essentially not that much different from hash browns. It's grated potatoes with a little bit of egg, a little bit of flour. If you want some breadcrumbs to make them nice and crispy. And then what you see here is just one of many ways in which you can eat them. This has a little dollop of applesauce. You can also do a little dollop of fresh cheese, pork. There's a whole host of different ways in which you can eat this. But Apfelpuffer, or Riefkuchen, as the Germans also call it, is one of those dishes that everyone knows. Everyone's mother knows how to make it. Everyone's aunt and everyone's grandmother knows how to make it. So it's very rooted in the local cuisine. You can also get it in restaurants, and there's actually already some highfalutin nouveau cuisine restaurants who come up with like decomposed kartoffelpuffer. Don't do that. It's silly. The next thing in Cologne, of course, is beer. And beer in Cologne, every city in Germany or every region in Germany has its own tradition when it comes to alcoholic beverages. Some regions are beholden to wine. Other regions are just doing beer. In Cologne, it's a little bit of both, but it's more of a beer city. It has a lot of breweries. And it has a very specific type of brewery, something that is called a Brauhaus. And a Brauhaus can only serve the beer that is brewed on the premises. So it doesn't get more local than that. You should really not try to have any other kind of beer than the beer that is served in a particular Brauhaus. And with that comes a whole culture. You always in Cologne get your beer in a relatively small glass. You can see those here in the image. They're almost like long drink glasses. And you think, well, I thought the Germans were famous for drinking lots of beer. And yes, they are. And all that you need to do is have lots of these small little glasses. This is exactly how it works. What will happen is, as the waiter approaches your table, a waiter in Cologne is called a Kürbis. The Kürbis will hand out beers around the table. He usually has one of those high trays that has slots that fit glasses of beer, and he will hand out the beer. He will put a beer. What do you call these things? Can't think of the name right now. Bierdeckel. Essentially a coaster, a beer coaster, and on the beer coaster he will note how many beers this table has had. If the Kürbis comes by with another one of these trays and you have your glass and it's empty, you just get a new one. If you don't want to drink anymore, you have to notify the waiter. If he puts another glass there because you didn't notify the waiter, then it's your problem and you drink. And the way to notify you take one of the coasters and you put the coaster on your glass. That tells the Kürbis that you're done drinking. It comes with certain foods, very traditional foods. We do this with you on the Rhine River cruises. It's one of those great things. It helps to have someone there to explain all of these things to you that I give you a bird's eye perspective, but it's great fun. Not haute cuisine, very, part of it is very stick to your rib foods. It's good, it's comfort food, and it's a great experience. You kind of have to do that when you're in Cologne. When in Cologne, do the beer. And then you start to head further up the river, and this is when you hit wine country. So as you go through the middle Rhine, and this is the section very well known for its castles, you start to see vineyards. The Romans started with these vineyards a very long time ago. The Rhine is kind of the border of the Roman Empire. As you go upriver towards Basel, on the right-hand side was the Roman Empire. On the left-hand side were the barbarians. And now, on both sides of the river, you have vineyards. And it's one of the oldest wine regions in Europe because, like I said, it's 2,000 years ago that the Romans planted the first vines. As you get out of the very narrow confines of the middle Rhine, you end up in Rüdesheim. And Rüdesheim is one of the first wine villages that is in an area called the Rheingau. This is where the landscape opens up a little bit. You have these rolling hills. The vineyards get a little larger. It's not these incredibly steep valleys anymore. And that's where you drink your Rieslings. It's primarily the wines that you drink in the Rheingau are white wines. And one of the things that you can do there is we visit a castle in the evening where you can have a very nice meal with local ingredients and local dishes, and you drink the wine that is produced in the vineyards surrounding the castle. And that's I always think that that's perfect. You get to drink what you've seen along the way. It's one of those beautiful things on a river cruise. So much of it, on especially along the Rhine, but all of the other rivers, the Danube, the Elbe, even. The Main, I'm getting a little carried away, I admit that. The Moselle, of course, in France, you have the same thing. There's nothing nicer than to float by on a river ship and to look up and in the restaurant say, I would like that wine over there. And the restaurant will have that wine. That's kind of how we want to do it because we want you to have a very, very regional experience. Also, if you want, you can go out and get the wine, bring it onto the ship. No, we do not charge a corkage fee. We just want you to enjoy the wine however you want, whether you buy it on board or whether you buy it on shore. We don't really care as long as you do drink a little bit of wine because it's so much part of the experience. Okay, and then as we move further along, this is an excellent picture. This is some of the food that you can have with a leisurely glass of wine. In particular, this is a Flammkuchen. And a Flammkuchen, it literally means it's a flame cake. It's essentially kind of like a pizza. It doesn't have the same ingredients. There's no tomato sauce. Instead, there is this white sauce that has a little bit of cream in it. And then you put some bacon bits or some ham bits, some herbs on it, maybe a little bit of extra cheese. Onions are always very important, and you bake it just kind of like a pizza in a pizza oven very quickly. Very thin layer of dough. It gets crispy, and it's a very popular snack all the way along the Rhine. And the interesting thing is that Flammkuchen is a German word. It's also used on the French side because Strasbourg, which is a little further upriver yet, in Alsace, it's the capital of Alsace. Is a city where they speak Alsatian, which has more words that come from German than words that come from French. So even the cuisine in that part of France is a little on the, I would almost say on the Germanic side. I'm sure that we have a slide, James. This is Strasbourg, and now James, go right on to the next slide because we'll have Choucroute. Choucroute is sauerkraut. It's basically cabbage that has been marinating, for weeks or months in a little bit of vinegar and wine. And you serve that with meat, potatoes, lots of different meats. And one of the things that is, again, somewhat of an acquired taste, Europeans, especially in this part of the world, tend to eat quite a bit of organ meat. So you will get your choucroute. The way it's served in France is you will get a good thick piece of pork, which is, just it's not exactly like a pork chop. That's not how it's baked. It's cooked or boiled. And you get sausages with it. And some of these sausages are wonderful. And some of these sausages, again, are something that you want to try once if you're a little adventurous, because one of them, for instance, is black pudding. But it's all good. It's all very much food that you can eat really well in shoulder season. There's nothing better than a choucroute when it's still a little cold outside. If it gets a little warmer, then you have a glass of wine and some flammkuchen. You don't go with this kind of this hearty food. The tarte flambée is essentially the same thing, is the French word for flammkuchen. And I don't hear, in the rest of France, they say tarte flambée because it's a French word. In Alsace, they'll say flammkuchen. And bakkeoven is another. That's an interesting dish. It's a meat and vegetable casserole. You are to serve this in a clay pot. And Alsace has a long tradition of making the most beautifully decorated pottery. There are whole villages that concentrate on that. You can buy this in Strasbourg itself. These big pots, and essentially is really just. You cook this forever. It goes on and on and on. It's the whole process of a bakkeoven takes about 12 hours. It used to be, bakkeoven is the word for bakoven, which means the oven. And it used to be that women would do a lot of the preparation at home in little villages, and then towards the end of the day they would go and visit the local baker, who still had a little bit of heat in his oven, in his baking oven, bakkeoven, and the women would give their casserole to the baker, who would then keep it there for another number of hours, and to make sure that the baker or anyone else would not take what was in the casserole, you would put a loop of bread dough around the casserole. And that's how you would know that, if the seal was broken, you knew that the baker's son had been, sneaking, eating at your casserole. So again, Alsace. You're still eating, very. A lot of it is stick to your food. It's great in summer, of course, everywhere you eat ice cream, but especially in shoulder season, the food there is perfect. And then fast forward a little bit, then we end up in Switzerland. Here we have a little bit more of Alsace. I should point out that cake, or that it's more of a bread that sits on top. That is a Gugelhopf. And again, doesn't sound very French, does it? It's again, it's kind of a German word. It's a relatively dry cake that has almonds in it. And it's eaten at all kinds of festivities. You get a nice big slice of it, and you have it with a cup of coffee. And what you see at the bottom, that's just another version of the flammkuchen. And what we do in Strasbourg in particular is you can spend hours just walking on our culinary tours from one delightful thing to another. Of course, Alsace is also part of it's the northern part of the wine region, of the wine road that runs along the foothills of the Vosges Mountains. And the Alsatian wines, again, are primarily white wines. Every little village has its own wine fair. And especially in fall, there's nothing quite. And I can say this because I I live in Basel, and Basel is at the very bottom of this mountain range that runs along the Rhine. So I cross the border, and it takes me about 20 minutes to get onto that wine road. And particularly in fall, it's gorgeous because everything starts to turn colors, and you have these castles on the hills, and every little village has its own wine fair. And a lot of the wine in these regions is consumed, and this is on both sides, by the way. The Black Forest is known for its Black Forest cake. We'll get there in a second, but it's also a region that produces wine, again, predominantly white wine. And in all of these, the reason these wine regions aren't as well known as some of the other, the Bordeaux region or Burgundy, is that historically a lot of that wine has been drank very quickly. And stays local. Alsatian wine now has made it all over the world, but in particular the wines from the Black Forest region, that still gets drunk mostly within a few years. They're light wines. They're perfect for summer days, and a lot of it never really leaves that part of the world. So this is another thing that you kind of need to keep in the back of your head. You will pick up some wine along the way that you can't get anywhere else because it's not exported. Okay, so now we're in the Black Forest, and I've already mentioned it. The icon of the Black Forest is the Black Forest cake. And there are a handful of things to think about. This is a relatively fanciful version of a Black Forest cake, but there are a handful of things. The cherries are marinated in a little bit of kirsch, and that's important because the cake has it's not drenched in alcohol, but every white layer also has a little bit. Excuse me. Every white layer has alcohol in it, a little bit of kirsch. That's very important. The other thing that's very important is, and this is just, I want to manage your expectations. There's a lot of cream. There's a lot of whipped cream. In Germany, there's no sugar in the cream. The idea is that you taste the cream, not so much the sugar. So if you're not used to that, you're like, something missing. If, however, you just embrace your inner German and you eat it without the sugar, it's perfect. It's really one of those very perfect German cakes. And you can get that anywhere in the Black Forest, and it will not disappoint. And it is precisely because everyone does it the exact same way everyone else has always done it. Forever and ever and ever. It's a very, very traditional cake. And then from the Black Forest, we arrive in Basel, and now we're in Switzerland. Yep, this is Basel, and the Swiss live in a small country with a lot of cows, and those cows make a lot of milk, and the milk is turned into cheese. So much cheese that the Swiss always wonder what to do with the cheese. And one of the things that they know how to do with the cheese is in a fondue. Again, this is shoulder season food. In summer, it's something that you do because it's fun. It's great fun, but it's really, the Swiss themselves eat it really in winter, in fall, and a little bit in spring. It's really simple. The ingredients are wine, usually Emmental and Gruyere. It's usually a mix of 2 or 3 cheeses, and you have a lot of regional versions of it. The version that they have in the French Alps, for instance, it's an Alpine dish. In the French Alps, there you use 3 different French cheeses. The Swiss tend to use Gruyere a lot and tend to use Emmental a lot. And you basically bring the whole thing to a very, very slow, not really rolling boil, just a very, very low boil. Sorry. And then you dip pieces of bread, or you dip potatoes in, and that's what you eat. You basically eat a lot of cheese. The other version of this is a little different. You can also use the potatoes, put them on your plate. And a raclette is a little different. Raclette, every person that participates in a raclette either has his own little pan, or you have a half a wheel of cheese where someone scrapes off molten cheese, and then you get a glob of molten cheese on top of your on top of your potatoes, and that's what you eat. And that doesn't sound very appealing, but I can assure you that it is. It's delicious. It's special raclette cheese, and it is something that you almost have to do when you're in Switzerland. And now, I imagine that not everyone wants to go out and try all these things because you have wonderful, lovely food on the ship. And of course, what we do on the ship is it's really, if you will, there's a handful of things that you need to keep in mind. We serve fresh food, as much as possible locally inspired. We try to take, if you will, the rough edges off of the really acquired tastes. For those, feel free to wander into town and try something that you might just want to do once in your life. We also have things that you're familiar with from home. We assume that most people, 4 or 5 days into their trip, may just want something that they're really familiar with. Let's say a piece of salmon or so, or steak, or even, we serve comfort food, if you will. Always available, as we call it. And then we have these events. And you can imagine these events where we do a little bit of, we call it the taste of events, where we may have some waiters dressed up in traditional costumes of the region. And we serve all these kind of little finger foods that are known in a particular part of Europe. We do this in France, we do it in Germany, we do it in Austria, we do it further down the Danube in Eastern Europe, just to give you a flavor. And of course, I think the biggest attraction really on eating on the ship is that it feels a little bit like home. Our service is always very friendly. It's always very unassuming. As you know, we don't do white gloves. We don't want to intimidate you. We just really want you to be comfortable and have friendly service. So that's always what the focus is on. So you can have as I mentioned you can bring your own bottles of wine from outside. We have a wine list that is specific to the region that you travel through. And there also we try to strike a balance between what you're familiar with and things where you may want to be a little adventurous. And that, in a nutshell, is the culinary experience off the ship and the culinary experience on the ship. And now, gentlemen, yes, I should mention that. We do have on the sun deck, and this is just, this is not just in case the chef has forgotten to get his sage or his rosemary or thyme. We just always grow it there. We have an herb garden on the ships, and they're not just, they look very pretty, yes. They're not just there to look pretty. We also use what grows there. Well, thank you very much. We'll see you some other time at Wanderlust Wednesdays. Have a great one.